Welcome to the first episode of season 4 of Third Song In with Tom Polachek and Chris Derrickson. We had a lot of fun in season 3, and as a result, we're back. And so is she. Liz Armstrong, who is one of our biggest fans and, in a good way, one of our biggest critics, is joining us to share what she likes best and likes least about Third Song In. Should be fun.
This is Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
All right, welcome back, Liz. What are you gonna do to entertain us today?
Oh boy, you didn't tell me about that. Don't do that to me.
We brought you back for a special purpose, though, because Chris and I consider you to be our number one fan.
Aw.
And one of the few people who I think actually paid attention when we said we had an email address. So you've given us critiques, comments. You've done you've given us feedback, which we really like to get from various people. But you've been most consistent, and we thought it would be kind of cool to have you come back and grade us a little bit. Tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong.
And we called this episode Liz Likes because we're trying to skew it in the direction of positive stuff.
Sending out positive energy.
Well, I told you that the best part about the episode is you two.
Wow, that may not be a good sign.
And knowing how you two talk trash about each other and yourselves, I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm gonna counsel you a little bit to be kinder to yourselves.
See, that was my true the reason for all of this is when I just wanted free therapy.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. I needed some help. I was talking to somebody about the podcast and, frankly, about the fact that you can count the people who listen to us regularly probably on, I don't know, 2 hands maybe. But, our original thought in doing this was really just to catch up and, to do what we were already doing via text and just kind of, formalize it a little bit and see if maybe some other people might be interested. But one of the things that I have found or thought about, I guess, is that this is kind of a method for us to create a little time capsule for our kids. And, obviously none of us have grandkids at this stage, but eventually grandkids, in fact, Liz, I think Andy, I know there are these services that you can buy where you interview your parents or, I don't know exactly how they work, but I know he's doing something like that with his parents. And I realized in talking to him about that accidentally, I think Chris and I are doing the same thing. Like our kids are going to be able to, listen to this stuff and listen to stories about our youth and listen to our friends too, which is kind of cool. Listen to you and Andy and Joe, who was our guest last season. And I thought that was kind of cool because, I haven't done anything else and we have pictures and that's about, like everybody else, a little bit of video here and there. So that's kind of cool that we get to do that, but I'm not sure that makes it interesting to other listeners.
I didn't think about that. So now I'm regretting doing 3 episodes of drunk stories.
That's actually why I want to do more.
Like he used to be fun. He used to have a good time.
Exactly. That's my kids think I'm just the most boring person in the world at this stage. And they're not wrong.
And honestly, not having my dad, I wish I had more things with his voice because like you said, pictures are pictures, but when you hear them talk, especially like my dad coming from Germany, he had a hell of a story and I really should have put that down.
I have a road trip planned in the next couple of weeks. I'm flying down to Arizona and driving back here to Joliet with my dad.
Oh,
he's actually, it's really generous of him. And he's getting a new car and he's giving his old car to my kids. So we figured this was a good excuse for him to make a visit. Yeah, no, it's going to work great. But I'm thinking about just turning on a voice recorder for parts of the drive because we've got a long, long drive to get up here. And I thought maybe I'll kind of half-ass interview him and we might even put it together as an episode here for Third Song In.
I think that's a great idea. I like that.
So anyway, we asked you to review our last 3 seasons. This is our, as we said earlier in the intro, this is our season 4 premiere, and we're doing something very different. But one of the things that I thought would be kind of cool is to hear somebody who has listened. I think you've listened to every episode, if I'm not mistaken.
I have. I think I have.
And I know you have
Goodness.
thoughts about it. And we thought maybe she might want to tell us what's good, what's bad, what were her favorite things, what were her least favorite things, and do that right now.
Well, I said I kind of am approaching this assignment like a master class. I'm like, okay, it's a Coursera through Tom and Chris. Review our podcast and tell us what you think about it. No, I was saying I've been in the car a lot. I took an elderly golden retriever up to a new owner in Wisconsin yesterday. So that gave me about 4 hours in the car. So I listened to a lot of old episodes, which was kind of fun because I don't remember anything. I know you say that about Chris, you can't remember anything. I can't either. But I will say again, my favorite thing about your podcast is just listening to you two because I like you guys. And I don't, like Tom says, I don't know how that translates into other people who don't know you and don't know your stories. So one of my things is just like, who do you want to listen to your podcast? Because you say your kids don't listen to it.
They don't.
They don't.
I can get my kids to read the blog if I send it to them directly, and then I'm pretty sure they just skim it. So
That's right. I know one of my kids listens to you, and I hate to burst your bubble, but Blood Mulch is Sloan.
Oh,
So you didn't know who that was, but that was my kid. So it just trickles down through the art.
Yeah, although that's still very cool. That
Yeah.
because we never did figure that out. I forgot we were going to try to like search socials or something and see if it came up.
that's
So Sloan
cool.
listens fairly regularly?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep. And I told them, I said, they didn't know it was you, and I don't want to tell them because I want to be like, who is this person? But yeah, but it's pretty cool to have. Sloan's 30 now, so youngish.
Yes. I can't believe she's 30. That's crazy.
I know.
They're 30.
No, I know.
Well, I am personally happy that Blood Mulch is your daughter versus just some random person. No offense to the random people out there. But...
Yeah, we'd like some random people, but that was that was also a great recommendation she made too. That's really cool.
Yeah. Sloan likes music, and Sloan, has got a big brain like you guys. So
I just have a big head. Big forehead.
I used to say this to my kids. I say, be nice to my friend Chris. Be nice to my friend Tom. When the kids were being mean to themselves, I'm like, come on, Sloan, be nice to my friend Sloan. I have one other thing on the self-help thing. I have a very wise friend, and I think this applies to you guys because of your mixtapes and all that. But when you're about to say something negative about yourself, say, don't tell that story, don't play that tape, because we all have these things in our head that we just keep, oh, of course I screwed up. I always screw up. Or, of course, you're not worried. You've never worked hard enough in your life. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, what's funny is I know I'm good at work. I don't have a problem with that. I don't give myself shit about that. It's all the other stuff.
And who cares about all the other stuff, really? I mean, work's the most important thing, right?
Is it really?
No, I was being sarcastic. Yeah, but I don't want to get into let's talk about why we're sad about our lives.
Yeah.
Tom and I are self-helping each other. It's okay.
Okay, good. That's what.
Yeah, that probably is actually one of the other goals of this podcast, whether we knew it or not. I think it is good. And the cool thing is not only do we do this, which is we record roughly once a week, so we see each other and talk to each other for about an hour and a half. That actually ends up becoming more or less an hour podcast. But we text much more than we did before.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of it is because of the podcast and it's like details about it. But then life sneaks into all that. So we end up talking on the phone and finding out about, my dishwasher breaking yesterday and my car breaking down basically the exact same moment. And, Chris is talking about going to see his kid at soccer camp or whatever it may be. Yeah. So that really worked out. And I think that was an underlying goal that we had to do this in the first place. So, it all depends on how you measure success. And we are not measuring it by the number of people who hear this podcast.
Or should you? Because I mean, it's not like, you're not getting money from this. You're not getting fame and notoriety. You're getting, it's important. The journey is important, right? And you're getting a lot out of the journey for sure. Yeah. And people who do listen and enjoy it are getting that too.
Hold on. What'd you say? I got stuck on the fame thing.
Chris really wants to be famous for this podcast.
I don't want to be famous. I was kidding.
You would bail. Like I said, if this podcast gets too popular, Chris won't have anything to do with it because that's what he does.
Yeah, imagine if you were too popular for yourself.
That sounds like a song title.
It does. It does.
Maybe that's your next thing. You should start writing songs based on your stories and your...
I could see you writing lyrics. I think
I could write lyrics. I could not write music.
Yeah. We'll slide stuff to Condren or something, or
Tom's
maybe
got
Joe Falisco.
Yeah, you've got music friends.
A couple music friends.
My dishwasher broke, and then
perfect. Write that down.
Some bad voices, really slow guitar.
That's me. I got the bad voice. I'm good.
Yeah,
and I have a connection. Blue Elon Records emailed me again. So
did they?
Yeah.
Are you? Have you sent them like links to the podcast or anything like that?
No,
I think you should do that, man.
They're just telling me that the new Soul Asylum album is out.
You got to work on your sponsorship with them.
I know.
That was another thing I was going to ask you guys, how you feel about putting so much stuff out. Do you feel like you have to put something out every week? Or, because you're doing a blog and an episode, that's a lot of content.
Obviously, we're feeling our way around all of this, but I do feel like, as far as the podcast is concerned, if we want it to be even a relatively going concern, the impression I get from what I've read and my own experience is that we really do need to drop episodes regularly, and weekly seems to be best.
Okay.
Like we had a drop off in listenership in between seasons 2 and 3. And I think at least some of it was attributable to the fact that we took kind of a long break between seasons 2 and 3 as we were trying to figure out what to do next. And when you read about it, it's, if you're sporadic, it's, nobody's going to find you and nobody's going to listen. Okay. And if you're not relatively regular, I mean, I suppose, we could experiment with every other week, and that may be necessary depending on work and what happens with family and what have you. But really, from my perspective, I mean, one more year of high school, then my kids are in college, I'm going to have more time, than I have right now. I'm not sure that's true for Chris for a couple reasons, but that part I think we do need to do. And I don't know, Chris, how do you feel about the blog in comparison to the podcast or in conjunction with the podcast? What are your personal feelings about writing that stuff and putting it up?
I don't disagree with Liz that it might be a bit much, but I find it helps me be a little more creative in what we discuss. I've always enjoyed writing, and going through that exercise of, framing your thoughts, and then I like to close out, at least the people may find it surprising, but I like to close out with something that makes you remember it, and or at least makes you laugh. So trying to get all that into a clear, concise essay essentially has been, it's not cathartic, but it's been very helpful for me in far as when we discuss things. And I don't know, to me, it plays into the podcast. It allows us at times to hook into it. I mean, I think in the last recording, I mentioned it a couple times, not really completely on purpose, but I don't know, it just helps me think through. And then as I think some of these blogs have helped us think about other episodes, so that's sort of a circle of creativity for me.
When you say too much, do you mean too much for people to consume or too much for us to do?
Both. I mean, like say I pretty much always listen to your podcasts within the week of them coming out.
God
If
bless you.
next day. Well, and I spend a lot of time in the car too, and but if it's too much, I don't always read the blog because I kind of forget about that. And that to me, I like it, but I'd rather listen. But it's more if it's too much for you guys, you could do like an alternative blog 1 week, podcast 1 week, blog 1 week, podcast 1 week. It gets to be too much for you guys. I don't know. You're doing it. I don't know. I don't know how much time it takes, or if it's fun for you, then you want to do it every week.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we both have the experience Chris and I both have had with the blog is that once we sit down and start to write, then it usually just cranks out. In my case, if you asked what my secret identity was, I would say a writer way before a broadcaster. Like I've never thought of myself as a broadcaster, and I've always thought of myself as a writer who doesn't write, which those aren't really the very successful writers. But this has really been an excuse to it's kind of, hey, it's my week to write a blog, and I keep a kind of an outline. A la Liz, I have a list in my phone of possible topics, and I'll pull one up and start to write on it. And sometimes I'll start one and get nowhere and leave it, and then start another one, and then just crank right through it. But to me, that's truer to what maybe if I had taken different or made different career decisions way back when, I might be writing more than I do now. So I really like that part, truthfully, and maybe I'm more comfortable with that than talking with a microphone in front of me.
Yeah, and I've had 2 topics in the can for 3 months, and then for the last 2, so basically the last 3 weeks, since we rotate, I've thrown them away, not thrown them away, but I've given up on them. And then like within roughly an hour, one was like 30 minutes. I sent it over to Tom, and he's like, "This is the best one you've done."
Yeah. I was like, you misspelled the word, and that was the only comment I had on the whole time. I was like, this is really good.
And
Well, that's great then. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
but
good.
I mean, it's worth thinking about with the every other week. I mean, that would be, we'll see. I mean, at some point, we're not the most creative guys in the world. We're going to run out of ideas. So
right.
Might need to pace ourselves.
I think having a guest is a great idea. Number one, because it just, I think you should do episodes with just the two of you, but I also think that the guest ones are fun. Then you get more people exposed to it by them sharing it.
Yeah.
And you of course told me that Andy was more popular than me, and some people get competitive about that.
To be fair, I didn't put it that way.
No, you didn't say it that way.
No, you heard it that way.
Of course I did. Of course I did. Damn it.
Hey, Andy's more popular than all of us. His episode is the most listened to out of anything we've done. Not just you. Yeah, everybody.
You're right there with us.
Yeah, actually higher than us. And that's funny you say that, because our most listened to episodes, like of the top, I don't know, 5 on Spotify, and we're not really good about the stats part of things because people listen in a bunch of different areas. But on Spotify, I think 3 of the top 5 are guest episodes. You, Andy, Anna, I think my daughter Anna are, I think, the top 3, or 3 in the top 5 or 6, something like that.
Well, yeah, it's free publicity, and it's getting maybe a different stream of people taking a look at it. But I still think that I don't know how do you market this to Fight Out guys at all?
It's funny you say that, because the short answer is no. First of all, market is in quotes, right? Because we don't market anything.
Right.
But if I tell a story, or Chris tells a story about somebody that I think would find the story funny because they're in it or they were there, I'll text a link to them. So like Rick, who lives out in Pennsylvania, I sent him the last one, or the last drinking one, because there's a story that he would recognize. And that's about it. That was one of the things that Joe said after we did his episode at the end of season 3, was we have an email chain that had to do with the reunion that we were going to do. And it was all basically guys we were in the fraternity with and all graduated roughly around the same time. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to send that link out to all those guys if you don't mind." I'm like, "Yeah, I never even thought of that." So again,
I think I mentioned in my long diatribe, I listen to women of my age, talk about stuff. And unfortunately, like I feel like all the women my age talk about is menopause, which we're not going to talk about. But so you want to, that like experience and you want to, hear what did they, relive the glory days kind of thing. And that's fun to listen to. And I think that you've got a lot of really talented people we went to college with who.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, and I was going to ask you this later on. Actually, I was going to ask you, which guest episodes you liked or which kind of format did you prefer. But we've got a list of potential guests, with Chris's boss being at the top of that list. But a lot of the other names are people from college. People we graduated with. There's a woman who I think she's retired now, but orthopedic surgeon here in Northern Illinois. Yeah, and she's said she's interested. So now it's just a question of us figuring out the timing of it. Because she's also she's a published author. She's written some essays and short stories and maybe even some poetry, I think. So, like you said, really creative, really smart people. Chris and I have talked about it before. When I talk to people about who I went to school with, I'm like, yeah, I literally went to school with brain surgeons and rocket scientists.
Yeah.
And most of those people
me.
were pretty interesting. And then I say, and Chris.
And me.
Chris, stop it.
That pisses her off, man. I'm telling you. We had a conversation about
We had a conversation about this yesterday, Christopher.
I'm just kidding. I enjoy
thinks
making
you're too
fun of myself.
self-deprecating.
Yeah, you clearly enjoy making fun of yourself, sir.
You son of a bitch. Don't be stupid.
Don't be such an idiot.
But yeah, so that is on our list of guests, along with people we know in our communities who we think might be interesting. Yeah, I've talked to a couple people. Some people I don't think are comfortable with it, and
Right. I don't know. I feel like there's a wealth of content and a wealth of interest with WashU people.
That's a good idea. I'm sorry, some just
talk about music and you can talk about movies and you can talk about, but it's just a different, like I say, it's more people to get interested because their friends will listen. And
so, all right, so let's be a little more specific.
Okay.
And let me ask you, in terms of our regular segments,
mm-hmm.
Are there things that you like a lot? Are there things that you don't think work very well? Our newest segment is staff picks, which is the idea being to recommend something that's out like this week or recently anyway. And then things like taking listener questions and what am I missing? I'm missing something else we do. The playlist. Yeah, the playlist, which is like the foundation of what we wanted to do in the first place, I think.
Well, honestly, again, my favorite parts of the podcast are when you do the blind intro because it's some kind of funny story. And at the end, when you do the record, the bloopers, I love it because that's what I'm in it for. I'm just in it for you guys being goofy. The recommendation part, I'm going to be honest, it confuses the shit out of me because I'm a very orderly thinker and I love a spreadsheet and I love so at one point, I know it seems like I have like absolutely no life at all, but I made a list of all of the movies you guys were recommending and put it by the TV so we could because I can't remember what you told me. And I'm not always going to look at your website. And sometimes you recommend things that don't get on the website. And sometimes you put things on the website that are like 2 out of 5. I'm like, why did okay, I'm just being brutally honest right now because you're asking me. But it's like sometimes you do books, sometimes you do movies, sometimes you do music, sometimes they're all kind of jumbled up. And my little brain has a hard time remembering that. If I'm actually listening to you and I have other resources around me where I can go and listen to the music right away, or because you can't play the music during your episodes anymore, which was nice. That was nice when you could do that. I don't know how structured you are with that stuff because I don't, I didn't listen to all the episodes and figure out what you were doing. But to me, that seems kind of jumbled and it gets, it hurts my brain sometimes trying to remember what you have recommended versus what gets on the website. Because sometimes what gets on the website is not what I remember you talking about and wanting to check into,
That's because Tom's always has like 17 backups.
That's right.
That's part of it. And
That's
sometimes
definitely part of it.
And I
you
do
really
too.
want your backups, but you do the other ones because they are more obscure, because they fit your, what you thought you wanted to recommend.
Yeah, that's I mean, at least in theory, the recommendations are supposed to be based upon the theme of the podcast. So we don't can't necessarily, a recommendation for whatever the theme may not be the best movie you've ever seen, but it fits the theme. So that's where some of that comes from. I have been known to sneak extra recommendations in, although I'm not the only host of this podcast that does that, by the way.
You both do. You're worse.
But yeah, you're right. And what we found is going back and putting everything on the website, it doesn't really work very well, just because there's limited space and there's only so many things to click on. But I've thought about whether we want to kind of revamp how we do those recommendations. But I also think, I'm wondering what podcasts you listen to, because I listen to a lot of pop culture podcasts, and which they don't necessarily even have websites that are companion to the podcast, and they talk about everything kind of in that way. So you listen to a music podcast and it's just lots of different music that comes up, and you can't have an audio spreadsheet, right? So it's generally not on there. And other stuff like books and comics and just general pop culture stuff we're probably a little more scattered than most of those, a little less organized and a little more scattered, but it's more often that you'll see that, where they just kind of rattle through stuff. Because I've got a couple podcasts where I'll realize I'm listening and they're recommending something, and I'll realize I didn't really pay attention to the name of what it was. So I'll go, I'll hit 15 seconds back like 3 times to get to the name, and then either write it down or at least remember it at that point. But I think because we consume a lot of pop culture, I think we talk, we just kind of bounce from thing to thing sometimes. And I'm sure that's what's confusing.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's just me. That's just my, I like say, sometimes I approach things like a class, and I'm going to get tested on it and I got to remember what it was. And you don't. It's just a moment in time. Listening to the podcast can just be a moment in time, and it doesn't have to be anything that affects you past that hour.
We wouldn't quiz you, Liz. Well, hold on. What was my then recommendation for season 3, episode 6? Come on.
Wouldn't that be awesome if she could? She'd be, oh yeah. That was happy endings.
Oh yeah, that probably was.
That was the other thing I told Tom. If you had like one of those, some of these podcasts have somebody in the background, like their producer or their minion, right, whatever, like look stuff up for them, because you're always like, I don't know, what was that? I can't remember. I don't know. I'll put it I'll put it in post facto.
Well, that's one of the segments that came up completely organically that I actually like, because that allows us just to talk about it, and as opposed to correcting errors, which is originally kind of where it came from, because I think Joe emailed us and said, hey, you're dumbass, this is what it was. Yeah. But what I found is it helps you, like if you forgot the name of a director or something, we don't have to wait and look it up, whether it's somebody else or us. I mean, we do a lot of that. We got a keyboard right in front of us. But I like post facto, because then we can go back and fill in the gaps and try not to reach too far back. So if somebody does listen regularly, they're like, oh, that was just last episode.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that part.
I think we might want to, we're going to kind of discuss how to remodel some of the recommendations, but I think we both still like doing the playlist and just trying to come up with stuff that we don't think people have heard of, and might be off the beaten path.
Speaking of that, and this is again a nitpicky thing, but you labeled the extra playlist like 3rd song or something, or number 3.
Song number 3, yeah.
Number 3. When I searched song number 3, I got a whole bunch of things that weren't you, because it was song number 3 dash 3rd song in, I think.
Yeah, it says, I think I called it song number 3, a 3rd song in playlist.
Yeah. And unless you put all of that in there, it's very hard to find.
Yeah, is that on Spotify you were looking? Yeah, I don't like Spotify search anyway. Like I can type in the specific title of the podcast, and sometimes it doesn't come up in the top 5, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, that comes from just a lack of technical knowledge. I'm sure there's a way to do it that's better, for SEO in
Do you,
general.
do you listen through a different platform typically?
I usually use Apple Music when I listen to stuff, at least first time in. But these days it's probably equal Spotify and Apple Music. It's just, years ago, I was an Apple guy. I've been an Apple guy for ages and ages, an iTunes guy. So my subscriptions, like most of my music now, since I don't have my CDs, like I had to pay an annual subscription so that all those CDs I bought, I can listen to through iTunes. And
Gotcha.
so I'm kind of, they've got me. Let me put
They've
it
got
that
you.
way.
Yes, they do. Got it.
But I use Spotify a lot more now than I used to. But I don't like, Chris uses YouTube Music a lot, and I don't. And what's the other one we were talking about? Oh,
YouTube
Amazon Music.
subscription?
Yeah. I mean, there's a free version, but
yeah, so I have the free version and use it occasionally, but I don't pay for the premium, whatever it is, because I already paid for it.
Our daughter Megan pays for our Spotify because she was so irritated when she would come home and we would have commercials. She's
Yeah.
like, Jesus, Mom, like, can't you just pay for the? I'm like, no, it's just a matter of principle. She's like, oh my God, I'm putting you on mine.
Yeah, my son Jake pays, and I think Jake and Anna both pay for premium because for the same reason,
Yeah.
and in Spotify, and usually it's a Christmas gift from Dawn and I to them, and Tommy doesn't care. He doesn't care. He just listens to whatever he listens to.
Tommy. Aw, I haven't seen them in a while.
He's a good inch taller than me now, and looks very old. They look
They're
very
so
old.
cute. They are so cute.
So, Chris, did we get a question from a listener this week?
yes, Tom, we did. We got a question from Jonathan from Boonton, New Jersey. What is your favorite podcast to listen to all time or currently? Liz, why don't you start out?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, nothing like putting you on the spot.
Oh,
Something about menopause. I don't know.
yeah. Mel Robbins is like on every woman's list who's my age, but actually she's not my favorite. I would say your podcast is probably my most.
Oh, you're the best. You are the best. You may be full of shit, but you are the best.
No, I mean, honestly, it is the one I probably listen to the most regularly. I like Science Versus too. That's a good one.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Science versus?
Science Versus. So basically it's I think she's Australian, Wendy Zuckerman. And they take things like, is Diet Coke bad for you? Or do you really have to drink a gallon of water every day? And then they research it a little bit. So it's
Gotcha.
fun.
All right, I'll go ahead and go. I've mentioned this before. I'm kind of boring. It's not our episode, our podcast. I love our podcast. I love making it. I hate listening to it. I hate hearing my voice. I hate
Shocking.
I hate hearing myself say solid or great or whatever. I've said it before, but my favorite is one done by Tyler Mahan Coe, who is David Allan Coe's son. Cocaine and Rhinestones. He's only done 2 seasons, but they're chock full of information. It's about the history of country music, and a lot of it's the darker side or the unknown side of country music. His last season, I'm sorry, was all about George Jones and Tammy Wynette and all the stuff surrounding them. Some pretty interesting and dark stuff there. But he does it in season 1 was more straight ahead. He'd have a very different topic for each episode. Season 2 was this big, long narrative. And he would he'd have a big segment on like bullfighting in Mexico or something. And you're like, what the hell is he talking about? But somehow he always finds a way to tie it back together. So it's almost like reading, a really well-written historical, it's almost not a novel. I mean, it's history, but it's certainly got some literary touches to it. So I highly recommend that one. In addition to, I love Song Exploder. It's a quick little one. I've already talked about that one too. So Tom, what's yours?
A quick question. Is David Allan Coe's son, is he a musician as well?
Yeah, he only talks about it a little bit. I saw it. I think I read it in a magazine when he was promoting it. He was really young, and David Allan Coe took him on the road. I think they're a little estranged now. I don't think he loved the experience. but he doesn't ever, I've never heard him say anything bad about it. It just sounds like he was sort of thrown into the country / rock and roll life at a pretty young age. And I don't
But
think
he like performs and tours and stuff.
he did. No, I don't think he does anymore.
Okay.
I think he's all about this podcast. Like he raises money for it. He's on whatever that thing is, Patreon.
Yes.
So we should get on Patreon. I'm sure we might
Yeah,
we might have to pay Patreon, but
so I listen to quite a few podcasts, but it's funny. I kind of rotate through. I'll listen to one for a while and then just stop. A great example of that is Mark Maron's podcast, which is really popular. Everybody in the world has probably listened to it at one point or another. I was really religious in listening to it, and then after about 6 or 8 months of it, I just got tired of his shtick, and I just completely stopped. I just cut it off, and that's happened with a bunch of stuff for me. Currently, I really like a podcast called Films to be Buried With, which is hosted by Brett Goldstein, who is
Oh yeah,
from
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. Thank you very much.
Amongst a bunch of other things, yes.
Yeah, he's really creative, really smart. He's also nothing like his character in Ted Lasso. Like he's really kind of a mushy, emotional kind of softy guy. But he does love movies and films, and he has a really interesting format where he has a guest on every episode, and he asks them the same series of questions. The idea being is he tells them that they're dead, and that people want to know who they were by virtue of their responses to this set of questions. What's the first movie you ever saw? What movie made you cry the most? What movie have you seen the most? And he asks every guest the same questions. And then when he has repeat guests, he has a new set of questions that he asks his repeat guests. He's been doing it for a long time, long before he was ever in Ted Lasso. He's a stand-up too, or was anyway, stand-up. Really funny guy, really great. He has a lot of guests you've never heard of, a lot of British stand-up comics. And I really like it. And I've consistently been listening to it for over a year now. And that's a pretty good record for me. My all-time favorite, ironically, is actually by the same guy who hosts Song Exploder, Rishikesh Hirway, I think his name is. He did a podcast called West Wing Weekly with Josh. I feel terrible. I can't think of his name. It was an actor that was on The West Wing when the TV show was on. And it's just an episode by episode podcast. I usually don't like those very much. They were one of the first ones, I think, and they are really good. But it lasted from the pilot and then to the very last episode of that TV show, and then they just stopped doing it. That I love. It might be my all-time favorite podcast. And then there's one I listen to. It's the longest podcast I've ever listened to. It's called Doug Loves Movies, and it's a stand-up comedian named Doug Benson, who, when he started out, it was like a talk show, and he had guests, and they would talk about their favorite movies, and it slowly morphed into a movie trivia game show almost. And he's very upfront about it. It's basically an opportunity for him to plug his stand-up dates, because that's all he does. He is a working stand-up traveling comedian. But it's always funny. He has great guests. His guests are almost always actors, comedians, sometimes a director. And I've been listening to that podcast. First of all, it's surprisingly, it's been around for like almost 20 years now. And I've probably been listening to it for at least 8 or 10 years. And that one would be, in terms of the most episodes of anything I've listened to, that would be Doug Loves Movies.
I'll have to check that out. I love his stand-up.
Yeah, and they're short. They're generally less than an hour, and it's just a lot of riffing. There's no, other than the games he has, which are really easy trivia games. It's just him riffing with other people. And, if he gets a director or an actor, then they'll talk about their movies sometimes. Next up is staff picks.
Just around the corner from you.
So staff picks, we try to mimic the idea of going to the record store on Tuesdays where all the new records are out. We're going anytime, I guess. And when you can't find something, looking up at the board, seeing what the staff recommends. So Tom and I have our own staff picks, and Liz is going to join us this week, I hope. You may want to think about that one. So mine is from a band I've been listening to for years. They're from North Carolina. American Aquarium just released a new album called The Fear of Standing Still. It's typically rock and roll driven, like their stuff is. The lead singer, BJ Barham, has done a decent amount of solo material, and that stuff's usually a little more acoustic, a little more mellow. But when he joins the boys from American Aquarium, they rock it out. The album starts off with probably my second favorite song on the album, Crier. It's just a classic rockin' American Aquarium song. But what I think will be the standout on the album is the fifth song, Southern Roots, which includes Katie Pruitt on the song. I did read an article comparing or saying that one of the influences of American Aquarium is Drive By Truckers, and I think this song particularly highlights that. It's all about the complicated South, the roots of growing up in the South that can be frustrating at times, which I know all too well living in North Carolina. But one of my favorite lines from it, I always quote lines, is, "And if there's one thing I've found, you can't change the way you sound. You can only change the words that you choose. So I'm putting in the work and I'm digging in the dirt and I'm replanting my Southern roots." BJ Barham is the lead singer. I think he's the primary songwriter. He keeps this band going. I think they're hitting another stage where they might take it to another level. So that's my staff pick for this week.
Yeah, that's great. I was psyched to see that album come out. I saw it last week too. I haven't listened to it all the way through yet, though. I keep getting like 3 songs in, which I like the first 3 songs, but
yeah,
I haven't gotten past that yet.
All right, Tom, what's your choice?
My pick this week is for a TV show that airs on Netflix that came out early in 2024 that my kids turned me on to, called Tires. It stars a comedian, a stand-up guy who I don't really know very well, other than there was some controversy. I think he was going to be on the Saturday Night Live cast. I think he's the guy who said some stuff. They found some footage of him being kind of crude and maybe politically incorrect, and disinvited him, as I understand it, from being on Saturday Night Live. But he's a really funny dude. His name is Steve Gerben. So he's the star of this show that is set in Eastern PA and is basically about an automotive, it's an auto shop, kind of a repair, and it's called Tires because of what happens in the first episode. But it's an auto repair shop, and it's basically about how they're just trying to survive. And it's kind of your classic workplace comedy. I just found it to be really funny. You know how those shows, workplace comedies, it all depends on the cast and the ensemble. And these guys are so funny together. It is very crude. It is kind of, if I would compare it to something, it would probably be Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which some people don't like, and I could generally only take in small doses because they're just sometimes so off the wall. This doesn't push it quite that far. And the episodes are really short. It's like 20-minute episodes. And it's one of those where I watched the first season with my 2 boys all the way through. And I just thought they were really, really funny. And I don't know if it's been renewed. There is only 1 season to my knowledge right now. But I'm hoping that it's going to get renewed and they're going to do some more because it was really worth seeing.
Okay, but what was the name of it? I can't even remember.
Tires.
Tires.
It's called Tires, Tires. And
Very
Chris's
complicated name. I can see why I could not.
Yeah, because all those syllables and letters. And we are, and I say we, Chris is actually working on a new page on the website, which will be for staff picks only. So it'll be our, these recent recommendations. And it's up but it's not finished at this point. So it's just kind of a work in progress page, but that will be where we're going to put our staff picks on a completely separate page, which will hopefully help a little bit with one of the things you were talking about, which was, where to find the information. So recommendations will be under a tab called recommendations, and staff picks will be, I think, under a tab called staff picks, although that's not done yet. Okay. So anyway, what about you, Liz? Do you have a staff pick? Is there anything that's come out relatively recently that you would like to recommend?
I do. And by recently, I mean 2024, not 2020, right?
Yes. Yes. Staff picks are supposed to be
2000 is your now, which I gave you a hard time about.
Yeah, that just comes from being old, I think. But
that makes us old.
It is a little confusing, I agree.
Mine is something that you might listen to. I don't know. It's the artist is Brendan James, Brendan James. He is a singer-songwriter. He mostly does small shows. You can also he does like private backyard or events or whatever. He's just a really cool guy. His new song is Peacemaker. He's really just about putting good stuff out there and trying to make people feel better and be better. And I got to see him at Space in Evanston with
That's a great venue.
Yeah, our friends Andrea and Phil Shelton. They are way into live music scene coming out of where they live. They live in Winnetka, which is kind of not every man's land, but they are involved in their live music shows that they put on in the summer. And then they also have different artists come through and do shows in like a chapel. And they took Andy and I to see Brendan James at Evanston Space shortly after some medical stuff with me, and it was just really cool. And he's good. Very simple. Mostly it's piano and maybe two other instruments, but it's good.
Yes, and it looks like that song Peacemaker is on Spotify at the
Oh,
least.
good.
I haven't searched everywhere, but it's definitely on Spotify. Giving a shout out to Space. I went there for the very first time. I've been wanting to go for years because it's only about 5 years old, I think, maybe a little bit older than that. And that's where I saw Sun Volt play, and what a great! I think it's a very cool venue for that kind of performer. I really liked it, despite the whole North Shore-ness of it all. It's definitely worth
Evanston. It's Evanston, so it's a little bit better.
It's a long haul from Joliet,
yes.
But it was definitely worth the drive.
For the playlist this week, I'm riffing. I was going with a different song just to sort of annoy both Tom and Liz. I was going to pick a Richmond Fontaine song because Tom hates the voice and it's super slow. I know Liz loves her super slow songs, so I didn't pick that one.
That's Andy who doesn't like your super slow songs.
That's true. But instead, I decided to go with something that might entertain Liz. It's called That Shit Ain't Funny by the Brothers Comatose. It's a breakup song, but it's an upbeat breakup song, and it says the word shit a lot. So Liz likes when we curse. She likes when we giggle. So I'm going.
Stop it.
I'm going with a playlist pick that will probably make you laugh a little bit, although it's truly a breakup song. All the stuff that this guy found entertaining before, he doesn't anymore. So that shit ain't funny anymore.
That other breakup song you had where it was like the rewrite or something.
Yes, yep.
Oh, that's such a good song.
Isn't that a great song? Yep,
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, that was a good one.
All right, Tom, you're on.
I can't check it right now, but dude, I think you discussed That Shit Ain't Funny before.
I said it, but I didn't pick it.
Okay, good. That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
But I knew it would drive you crazy if
it was actually, and Liz was funny because I think she connected it. I did it on that same episode. Okay. Yeah, so I said that I was talking about the dude who went a little too far making fun of kids dying and stuff, and then I said that shit ain't funny. So good call.
Yeah,
you can include all this to show that we checked our facts.
It also shows I also listen to the podcast.
We all have memories.
My playlist pick for our very first episode of season 4 is a song called The Best Part by Edward David Anderson. It's from an album he did that came out in 2018 called Chasing Butterflies. Edward David Anderson is a regional performer in the Midwest. He's kind of from this area, kind of central northern Illinois. Very country folk. Great song, great album. I've seen him live play here in Joliet a number of times, but I know he tours a little bit, far flung. He gets out of the immediate area here, but not too far. He's definitely worth listening to. He's one of those guys who doesn't have a whole lot of followers in the big picture when you look at things like Spotify and what have you, but he probably ought to. I picked the song solely because our original idea for this episode was for you to kind of tell us about, what you thought were the best and worst things so far in the podcast. We deviated from that a little bit, which I'm very happy with, but I didn't have time to change my song. So I still think it's a good first song for my first pick for our third song in playlist, season 4, which you can find on Spotify, on Apple Music, on YouTube Music, and on Amazon Music. Look for the playlist and let us know what you think. So that's our episode. Thank you so much for being our guest, Liz. Not only were you our first ever guest, you were our first ever repeat guest.
Woo-hoo!
So you're always going to be in the record books. The third song in archives you'll always have a special place in our heart. But I'm really happy, really glad you joined us. We're going to take your comments to heart, and we're going to think about those things. We'll see what we change. You can come back as a guest maybe in another season or so and tell us whether we improved at all. But I would like to know if you have anything you would like to plug, anything you would like people to look for either on the web or on social media. Is there anything out there?
Yeah, I would love to put a plug in for Sloan, our oldest, who's out in the Pacific Northwest, has a little company called Little Skrunks, Skrunks. Often you get a skunk when you look it up, but it's Little Skrunks, one word, and they make felted creatures. Some can be custom made, or there are some that come out of Sloan's own creation, but as a parent, I'm pretty proud. And I think they're really cute and something unique and different. So if you want to take a look, just Google Little Skrunks. Probably the most entertaining way to see these little creatures is on TikTok, if you're a TikTok person, and it is also Little Skrunks on TikTok. So thanks for asking. Sloan appreciates it.
Absolutely. It looks like you can find that stuff on littleskrunks.com.
Yes.
I think, is it at Little Skrunks on TikTok? Is that
Correct.
what it is? So it sounds like if you look for Little Skrunks on social media in general, that's where you'll find Sloan's work. I've seen it. They are really cute. They're very cool. I think it was a great idea, and I'm hopeful that she can be successful with that. We will also put some links to her site, at the very least, if not other things, on our As Mentioned page on the website. So please check that out.
Cool.
Third Song In is recorded in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Joliet, Illinois. We have an email address at thirdsongin@gmail.com. Please email us. We don't want Liz to be the only person who emails us with comments and feedback. So let us know what you think of this episode, of prior episodes, of our recommendations, of our playlist. You can use thirdsongin@gmail.com to do that. Also, if you would please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, rate and review the podcast. Give us all your stars.
Give Tom all of your stars.
Give them to me. I'll deal with them. I'll distribute them appropriately. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube Music. Our website, as we've mentioned, is thirdsonginpodcast.com. We are very proud of that website. Chris is pretty much the architect of the site, and I think it's turned out really well. That's where you can find our blog. Every Thursday, we drop a new article. Chris and I tend to alternate. This past Thursday was an article of mine, and next week will be one from Chris. That's also where you'll find our recommendations and episode spotlight, which contains photos and other things that relate to the podcast, is the best way you can put it. Other content, exactly. That's also where you'll find our staff picks. And there's also a place there where you can leave comments to us as well. We have a Facebook page, Third Song In, on Facebook. And again, not a whole lot on there other than it's a good way to communicate with us. And we will respond if you do. You've been listening to Third Song In. Thanks for listening.
I knew the name of the song and I questioned myself.
Don't ever question yourself.
Exactly.
I'll do that.
you'd like to reach us and send it, if you blah, 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 blah.